We'll probably go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, for those of you that haven't seen my face either ever or recently, um my name's Jennifer Abernathy, and I recently signed on with Jill at Arch to help facilitate a couple of learning collaboratives, including this one, the Respite Voucher Learning Collaborative. So you'll be seeing and hearing from me. So if you get an email from Jennifer Abernathy, now you know who it's from. Um, so we're really excited to have you all here today to learn about what New York is doing to expand their respite voucher program across their state, which is very exciting. And it's a amazing process that they've gone through. So it'll be good to hear the how they got there besides the this is where we are part of the story. And I wanted to first turn it over to Jill for a few Arch announcements before we get into the presentation.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. I probably should have introduced Jennifer to you. We did introduce her. She's also going to be facilitating the volunteer and faith-based respite learning collaborative, and we introduced her on that last call. But to those of you who don't attend that, this is Jennifer. And Jennifer was actually one of the original leaders, peer leaders for this learning collaborative, because she was the executive director of the Tennessee Respite Coalition that for many years has been administering a respite voucher program with their Lifespan Respite grant funds, as well as other state funds. So she's very well positioned and has lots of experience to be in this position. So we're really excited to have her. And so welcome, Jennifer, officially.
Thank you.
I did have, and as Jennifer said, we had this wonderful presentation today with Abbey and Deana from the New York State Office for the Aging. And I don't want to rush their presentation because it's going to be full of so much wonderful information. But if time permits, and after you've all had a chance to ask all your questions about their program, if time permits, we will have some small breakout discussion groups, or just continue to meet as a larger group and answer some of the questions that I sent to you earlier in a discussion guide. A couple of Arch announcements very quickly. Again, all of you should be getting emails about all of the learning collaboratives, but I especially wanted you to know about the next Lifespan Respite grantee and partner learning collaborative on implementing the national strategy. The next meeting will be October 5th from 3 to 4:30, and we are going to try to meet a little more regularly than we have in the past, every month. And it's going to be now facilitated by Cheryl Donnell, who is the former director of the Nevada Lifespan Respite Care Coalition. And she's going to take the learning collaborative in a slightly different direction. So that'll be very exciting for all of us, with lots of mentoring and leadership skill development. So we hope that you will be able to join us for that learning collaborative. As many of you also, I hope, have seen, we announced the dates for the next National Lifespan Respite Conference. And the theme is Raise the Bar for Respite, keeping in the context of the recent release from ACL of the National Strategy to Support Family Caregivers. As our network moves forward, we want to dedicate our time and commitment to helping to implement those recommendations. And so that's going to be a theme that runs through all of the conference presentations and keynotes. Right now, the call for presentations is open. It will be open until October the 16th. As always, we will have our Lifespan Respite track. So I strongly encourage you to submit a proposal to present on any aspect of your Lifespan Respite grant activities. It's always a tremendous experience to be able to do that, to share nationally the great work that you're doing. And just so that you all know too, the Lifespan Respite Grantee and Partner Learning Symposium, which is essentially our grantee meeting, will be held the day before the conference on the 21st of May.
Jill,
Yes.
there's a question in the chat. It's May 2024, not 2023, correct?
Oh,
We
yes,
didn't all
sorry.
miss it, right?
No, I apologize. It is the 2024 conference, so that was a good catch. Thank you so much for letting me know that. Also, the grantee meeting is on the 24th as well. May 21st, 2024.
Yeah.
That was Geraldine with the good eye.
Yeah. Thank you. I also wanted to let you know that our applications are now open for our innovative and exemplary respite services practice initiative. If you are running or overseeing a particularly wonderful respite program that might be worthy of replication, please encourage them to apply for recognition from Arch. There is a very small honorarium associated with that, as well as the permission to use this logo that you see on the screen in any of their promotional materials and on their website. And we will try to bring as many of those programs to the national conference also as possible to be officially recognized nationally at that event, depending on how much funding we have at the time. But if you're interested in applying, please do so by October the 16th. These are the links to a recent information session that we had about the application. And you can read more generally about the program. What are the selection criteria? What do you need to apply? And all the information that you would need to do so are at these links. And I'll put all these links in the chat too in a few minutes. And that's really all I had to present today. I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer to introduce our guests. If you have any questions about any of the announcements that I just made, you can put them in the chat or email me or save it until the end and we'll get to it.
Great. Thank you, Jill. So I'm very pleased to introduce Deana and Abbey, our colleagues from New York, Office for the Aging. And they are going to really give a wonderful presentation today about how they got to the point where they're at with the idea of expanding their respite voucher service across the state and the innovative ways that they're doing that. So Deana and Abbey, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jennifer. So hi everyone, as Jennifer mentioned, I'm Abbey Derepentigny. I work at the New York State Office for the Aging, and Deana Prest is also joining me. We're going to be discussing our recently expanded Caregiver-Directed Respite program in New York State. You can go to the next slide, please. So we're going to start by talking about where we started, and then we're going to kind of go through the whole process and talk about how we got to where we are today. So next slide. So we try to coordinate our National Family Caregiver Support Program, or our Title III-E program. I'll call it the NFCSP for the rest of the presentation just because it's a mouthful. But we try to coordinate our NFCSP with our Lifespan Respite grant as much as possible, just to be sure that we are serving all caregivers and making sure that they're taken into account. So in 2019, we began working on program standards for the NFCSP, and the purpose was really to formalize information that we had been sending out to the network since the inception of the program in 2000, and to ensure that the AAAs were all adhering to the requirements outlined in the Older Americans Act. In 2018, we had issued a program instruction to our AAAs that allowed them to offer in-home respite care using a caregiver-directed model under the NFCSP. So as a goal of our standards, we wanted to expand the caregiver-directed respite to allow for out-of-home respite options, as well as using vouchers as a payment mechanism. So while we were doing all this prepping for our program standards, we also learned that we could apply for the 2020 Lifespan Respite Grant. And when we reviewed the notice of funding, we noticed there was a strong emphasis on direct respite care. So for our Lifespan Respite Grant, we partner with the New York State Caregiving and Respite Coalition. And the only direct service we really were doing was through mini grants. So we thought it would be a great opportunity to serve more caregivers to allow for vouchers. So we had many discussions with our team about vouchers for respite care, and we ultimately added it to our grant proposal, and we were awarded. So we did launch that voucher program, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. You can go to the next slide. So because NYSOFA and NYSERC were working toward a similar goal, we decided it would really make sense to partner and collaborate to ensure that our caregiver-directed respite programs were meeting the needs of caregivers, and they were also useful for the professionals who serve those caregivers. Next slide. And it was around this time when we were kind of working on things, we decided to join this Arch Voucher Learning Collaborative to help guide us in our efforts in New York. So we were attending meetings just to kind of learn from other states what they were doing and what was successful for them. And we found all of the presentations and the connections that we made really useful to help guide us in our work. And so then we decided that we were going to launch a caregiver-directed respite work group in New York State. And before we did that, we had a meeting with the states of Washington and Oklahoma, and we were able to learn some best practices and lessons learned that they've experienced with their voucher programs. Next slide, please. And then we found out we were awarded the 2023 Lifespan Respite Grant. And a couple of the things we put into our grant proposal were to expand and enhance respite in New York State, improve the coordination of respite and streamline access for respite, fill in gaps, and of course, implement a voucher model for respite for kinship families that also included an emergency respite component. So because we were going to do this, we decided that it would make sense to include NYSERC in our work group that we were going to have to assist with implementing and planning for their voucher program. Next slide. So we launched a work group in December of 2020. NYSOFA and NYSERC, we launched it together, and during that first meeting, we really reviewed the expectations that we had of the members, and we reviewed the goals of the work group. Participation was voluntary, and we ended up having 15 AAAs represented, 4 state respite programs. Like I said, we had participation from NYSERC, and we also had representation from our state level New York Connects team. And for those who don't know, New York State's Aging and Disability Resource Center, No Wrong Door, is referred to as New York Connects. So next slide. And these are the goals of the work group. So we wanted to expand caregiver-directed respite under the National Family Caregiver Support Program. We wanted it to be more flexible and person-centered, and we wanted to allow out-of-home respite options. And then the second goal was to develop a voucher model for kinship families with an emergency respite component under the Lifespan Respite Grant. So you can go to the next slide. And we developed a logic model when we were planning for the work group. So you can see on there, we had our inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and the impact. So some of the inputs we had were participants of the work group, the different funding streams, so the Title III funding and the Lifespan Respite Grant, and then the knowledge base of what we were going into the work group knowing. And then activities, we did a lot of research on various caregiver-directed models. Like I said, we learned a lot from other states in the Voucher Learning Collaborative. And we had a lot of great discussion during our work group meetings that, you know, we hoped would bring a lot of great information for planning for our voucher program. The outputs were the two goals that I just mentioned on the last slide. So expanding the caregiver directed under the National Family Caregiver Support Program and creating the voucher program under Lifespan Respite. And then the outcomes were an increase. We hope to see an increase in the AAAs that are providing caregiver directed respite, an increase in caregivers receiving person-centered services, more flexibility to serve the unique needs of caregivers. And then the impact, of course, we're hoping for improved service delivery, relief of caregiver burden. We want caregivers to feel more supported and the funds to be used more efficiently. Next slide. So after we launched the work group in December, we held monthly meetings with the participants from January to August. And in between each of those meetings, we held internal prep meetings with our state level team, where we developed agendas, we decided on speakers, we would develop presentations, and then we would come up with any open-ended questions or polling questions that we wanted to ask the work group participants. And we also sent out some reading material and different things for the work group members to review so that they could prepare for the meeting and then be ready to have the discussion during the meeting. This helped us really to make sure that the work group members were contributing their thoughts and weren't coming into each month's work group blind. So I think that was really helpful for us. And we got all of this material and came up with the ideas for the topics of our monthly meetings by using the ARCH Self-Directed Respite Voucher Guidebook. At this point in time, it was the previous version of the voucher guidebook, but we did use it as a guide for topics for each month, and we found it to be really helpful. Next slide. So then this is just a list of the topics covered at each monthly meeting. So we started with a level set meeting in January, just so that all of our participants were on the same page. And then in February and March, we did core considerations for caregiver-directed respite, and that actually ended up lasting 2 months. So there was a lot of great discussion in those meetings. So deciding on things like, should the caregiver get paid up front, or should the respite provider get paid, things like that. And then in April, we had 2 meetings. We did one on emergency respite and one on determining eligibility and funding prioritization. In May, we went through the application process in different forms. In June, we talked about capacity and marketing. July, we did program evaluation and data collection. And then in August, we did a review of the work group and a final wrap up. So next slide, please. In addition to the feedback we got from our AAAs and state respite programs and other professionals that were on the work group, we also thought it would be important to gather feedback from caregivers themselves. So this idea actually came up during one of the work groups. One of the participants said, you know, we really should take into consideration the needs and preferences of actual caregivers. So we had a conversation with the work group participant who agreed to facilitate, and she was actually one of our AAA caregiver coordinators. And she was a trained facilitator, so it worked out well. We asked her if she would be willing to facilitate the focus groups, and she was agreeable. So we had a couple of prep meetings where we developed questions that we wanted to ask the caregivers. We developed a flyer to get participation, and we kind of discussed, you know, how we would outreach to caregivers to get them to participate. So we held a couple different focus groups in the summer of 2021. 2 of them were virtual and 1 was telephonic. We had 18 participants in total. And before the focus group, the participants were given a list of definitions and acronyms so that if anything came up during the conversation that they were unfamiliar with, that they would have that to reference. And the caregivers were also given a gift card for their participation. Can go to the next slide. So this is the outreach flyer we developed. We had, the logo, our logo, NYSERC's logo, and then Westchester County, that's the AAA that helped us. We had their logo on there. We asked, are you a caregiver that needs a break, and put respite in parentheses in case they weren't familiar with what respite was when they were reading this flyer. And asked, would you like to choose who provides care for your loved one? And if you answered yes, we'd love to speak with you. And then kind of gave a little bit of information, the dates and the times, and then who they could contact if they were interested in participating in the focus group. And you'll see on there, we put that all the participants would get a $25 Visa gift card for their participation. Next slide, please. So these are the questions that we asked during the focus group, and participants were able to verbally answer each question. So the first question, which of the following respite types do you prefer? In-home, out-of-home day, out-of-home overnight, or a voucher? The second question, once services are rendered, should the family caregiver be responsible for paying the respite provider and then reimbursed, or should the respite provider be paid directly? Based on their answer to that question, do they feel that a formal agreement with individual respite providers is necessary? And would you like training provided for the respite providers that you intend to use? Next slide. And these are the last three questions that we asked. This first one was about creating a standardized name for our caregiver-directed respite program. So we actually surveyed the work group participants to get some of these names, and then we presented them to the caregivers during the focus group. How were you first made aware of caregiver supports? And then we threw out this last question: do you think if New York State had a different infrastructure with regionally named caregiver centers, information and resources could be more accessible? Do you feel this would be better? And we kind of put this question in there because in our 2021 Lifespan Respite grant, we were putting forth the idea of a regional caregiver wellness and respite center. So we kind of wanted to get thoughts on that as well. Next slide. And we did a final report from the focus groups. We had a social work intern with us, and she was able to gather all of the data from the focus groups, and she wrote this final report. And I think Jill just put the link in the chat if anybody wants to check that out. And in the report, you can find the background, methodology, the data, a summary of the responses, issues, concerns, and recommendations made by the caregivers, as well as the recommendations that we decided to set forth based on the focus groups. So I just want to highlight some of the key information from the final report, but like I said, you have the link so you can read it later. But in there, you'll find that there was a script that was read at the beginning of each group that really just thanked the caregivers for their time and emphasized the importance of their opinions. There was also a scribe at each focus group. The groups were recorded, but we had a scribe just taking down notes when the participants provided their answers. Some of the demographics of the participants: 83% were female, 44% were not employed, 78% were college educated, 89% were white. 42% of the care receivers were diagnosed with Alzheimer's or a related disorder. 5% had a diagnosis of Parkinson's, and 5% were post-stroke. 53% of the caregivers were caring for their mother, 11% father, 11% for their sibling, and then 5% each were caring for a husband, uncle, or their wife. So some of the recommendations that we gathered from the focus group, they emphasized allowing freedom of choice when it comes to when to use the respite and where it will be provided. They thought that the care provider should be paid directly by the agency and bypass the family caregiver. we heard a lot that, and we know this, caregivers have a lot of other responsibilities. So paying the respite provider directly would just kind of relieve them of making sure they do that. And then again, too, some caregivers said, they might not have the funds to pay a provider upfront and then have to wait for reimbursement. So they thought that paying the provider directly would be best. They also felt that a formal agreement with the respite provider should be developed, which I think we were surprised by this, and the fact that they thought that training should be mandatory for respite providers. We didn't think that them, hiring a family or friend, they would want it to be so formal, but they expressed that they would really feel better knowing that the provider understood and agreed to the expectations of the caregiver, and also noted that, they would feel more confident if the person that was stepping in for them had a skill set so they could really enjoy their break. For the program name, they suggested creating a program name with the words caregiver and respite in the name, just so it's easy to identify that it is a program for a caregiver. And then they also talked about disseminating information widely, again, because caregivers are unaware that there are services available to help them. And lastly, they believed that creating the physical, like the regional caregiver resource center, that's an actual place, would really help them to be able to find resources. So that's everything that I had. I'm going to turn it over to Deana, and she's going to talk about a little bit of where we are now.
Thanks, Abbey. And I have to apologize. I have no idea what's going on with my camera, but it keeps telling me that Zoom will not recognize it, and it works and then it fails, and I keep losing my picture. So I'm sorry. I thought I had it fixed, but it kept happening. So I apologize for that. So I get the pleasure of sharing with you how everything is going, because as you can see from what Abbey shared, we did a ton of prep work. But before I get into that, I did happen to notice in the participant list that Amber Goodrich is with us, and I would be remiss if I didn't give a huge shout out to Amber, because I don't think we could have pulled this off without her. She really led, I would say, all the work group and planning and agendas. And, I feel like Abbey and I had the easy job of being able to show up and just, facilitate and work through, talking with the groups each month. So just a huge shout out to Amber. We really do have such a great team at, the State Office for Aging. And I can't do anything without Abbey day to day. So that's a given, but we can go to the next slide, Jill. So as Abbey mentioned, we did build into our 3-year grant, the coalition launching a respite voucher program. So we kind of were excited at the fact that that was going to launch first before, we finalized our program standards under the NFCSP, because it really gave us a chance to, I guess, iron out any wrinkles that maybe were encountered, since a lot of the planning was done collaboratively. But they've been quite successful. So we can go to the next slide, Jill. And I think Doris has presented at this meeting in the past and talked about the success that they've had. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, we launched this in January. And I always say we, because even though it's the coalition doing the work, I feel like, we partner when it comes to structuring the model. So I will tell you that as Doris and her team were developing the forms and, the cover letter to the caregiver, and pretty much, every document that was going to be part of their model, they did share with us, and we did review and provide feedback and really worked together on all the necessary pieces. So that program launched in January of 2022. We did focus on kinship caregivers, and I don't think Abbey mentioned this piece, but one of the reasons that we felt it was necessary to target this particular population of caregivers is because we found that our AAA network in the National Family Caregiver Support Program was opting not to serve this population. So we only have about, I think it's 12 out of 59 AAAs that are serving older relative caregivers with their Title III funds. So we know there's a great need for respite with our kinship families. So we decided that that was going to be, you know, a target, a group of caregivers to serve with these vouchers. But we also know that there's, you know, other caregivers that are caring for individuals with chronic conditions that might not be eligible for some of those other programs that are available, both at the federal level and the state level. So, you know, the coalition set some funds aside to be able to tap into to make sure nobody was, you know, going without respite care if that was needed. So they're $600 vouchers. There are required forms, as I mentioned, and I know Rebecca's on today. I saw her listed too. So Rebecca Hyde is the voucher program coordinator with the coalition. So she could answer questions later on if there's specific questions that Abbey and I might not be able to answer. But the website link is there if you want to look at any of the forms. Again, we couldn't have done this without talking with some of the other states that had a lot of lessons learned that they could share with us so that we were successful. Okay, we can go to the next slide, Jill. So we have a video for you. We'll play this now so you can get a feel for this program. Doris, I think there's like 2 videos, but this one's in particular to the vouchers, and we thought that this would be good for you to watch.
My name is Doris Green, and I'm the director of the New York State Caregiving and Respite Coalition. We work to build a sustainable system of respite care to support caregivers across the state.
My name is Karen Wilson, and I am the Voucher Program Coordinator here at NYSERG.
Caregivers are everywhere. They're out in the community. They're taking care of children and adults who have special needs. A special need could be someone with cancer or Parkinson's or MS. In particular, caregivers can be kinship caregivers, and kinship caregivers are family members or friends who are taking care of a biological child who is not their own.
I care for my twin 5-year-old granddaughters, and they're wonderful. They're a handful. Caring for my granddaughters as a grandfather is very much different than what it was like caring for my daughter as a father. I'm twice as old. I'm more of a disciplinarian now. I don't have as much fun. I can't spoil them as much. I have to make sure all their needs are met as far as medical, school, and everything else that encompasses raising a child, and I'm a little rusty in that area. So it's extremely exhausting, it's extremely challenging. I'm on my knees every morning praying for help. And I just try to get through the end of the day.
Any caregiver needs respite, and kinship caregivers are no different. But kinship caregivers are often older adults who are raising younger children, and the challenges are immense for them. And so we need time for them to get away from the kids, again, so that they can go back and give their best care.
And also, there's an expense to this that probably a lot of the kinship caregivers did not think about.
We have a new program that offers respite to kinship caregivers. It's based on a consumer-directed model, meaning that the caregiver has the choice of who they want to provide care, when they want to provide care, where the care is provided. It gives the caregiver the power to be able to choose who they want and be comfortable and feel safe about it.
The vouchers can be up to $600 and can be used for any expenses that are related to respite.
Well, this new voucher program through NYSERG will help me, I hope, in supplying funds that I can pay for some babysitters or other things that come up that really I just don't have the means to take care of. And this is just another avenue of support that I greatly appreciate.
If you're interested in this program and you're a kinship caregiver, you just need to contact us and we'll be happy to send you a packet, or you can download all the documents on our website at nyscrc.org.
The people that run NYSERC, they're incredible. And I'm a lone guy taking care of my granddaughters. Parents are dead, family, what's left of them is in New Jersey. So I'm kind of feeling all alone. And being part of this program and involved with these people and the services they offer just makes me feel whole again.
Okay, so I hope the video gave you a little bit better understanding of, the program, and I think that the marketing has helped, and Rebecca probably could speak to this. I know we had, when we did the video, a different coordinator in Rebecca's position, but we thought it would be good to make sure that we were able to create that video and get the word out about this new program. So my computer crashed. So I'm hoping everybody can still hear me okay. I just jumped onto my other computer and I have my own slides in front of me so that I can keep doing the presentation, but I'm not sure what is going on with our network today. So bear with me. Hopefully, Jill, you're on the slide now where we have some data for the Respite Voucher Program, the slide after the video. So far to date, we did just get these figures from Rebecca. We have served 326 caregivers with a total of 17,035 hours of respite. There's a grand total paid out to caregivers of $226,320.55. 98% of caregivers said that the voucher program helped them to reduce their stress, and 100% of the caregivers said that the voucher program made a positive difference for them and their family. So we're really excited to, bring this to our National Family Caregiver Support Program. So we can go to the next slide. We're going to talk now and shift gears a little and talk to you about how we decided to incorporate this model as a new model within the National Family Caregiver Support Program. So I'm sorry that I can't see the screen, but hopefully we're after the title slide, and we're on the slide that's kind of giving an overview of our program and the standards, and why we made the decision to develop the program standards was because we did want to make sure that we were in compliance with the Title III Older Americans Act. And we really knew that there were, the opportunity here with expanding the caregiver-directed model, as Abbey mentioned earlier, with allowing for some out-of-home respite options and allowing for the use of respite vouchers. So this was our way of building, this into the program standards and letting our network of area agencies on aging know that they could start to offer these optional models, and that we were going to now allow vouchers, which I think they were excited about, but it's also, I think, just so different than the way that they're used to operating. There are policy and procedures that are required, and we did build in a component for background checks. And essentially with the background checks, the AAA, can make the decision as far as how we have like a baseline of background, like for background checks, we have a baseline of what they are required to do. But the employer is the caregiver, so it's ultimately up to them of like how extensive they want to go. So if they communicate that they want to do a more extensive background check, then the AAA through the program standards, understands that that is their choice and right, and that the AAA can use Title III funds to pay for the more extensive background checks. Many of our AAAs, I think we have 20 of them were previously approved to operate a self-directed model for respite, working with a fiscal intermediary. But as Abby mentioned earlier in the presentation, it was limited to only in-home respite. We weren't really allowing for other options. And we all know, you know, one size does not fit all. And so we really were excited about this opportunity to expand, you know, our caregiver directed and allow for some other models that AAAs could decide to launch. We can go to the next slide, Jill. So the way that we work at our state office with regards to any of these optional models is that they still need to go through a process of getting our approval, because we want to make sure they're not missing the mark, right? We want to have that opportunity to provide some technical assistance before they actually implement. So we have a process that we call Attachment C. And the Attachment C process is not something that's specific just to consumer directed. It's really for any sort of major change that the local area agency on aging is planning to make within their service plan. So it could be like closing a senior center, or maybe they're changing locations of one of their sites for meals, congregate meals. Any of those like major changes, they have to somehow communicate to the state office and ask ask permission and our approval for a major change. And we consider offering, a self-directed model, whether that's a caregiver-directed model through our National Family Caregiver Support Program, or, we do also offer consumer-directed in our home care program for our older adults, which is called ISEP. Expanded in-home services for the elderly program. So AAAs are used to this process in kind of sending this into us. And we have a cross-divisional, we call it a consumer-directed committee. So it's a committee that meets and reviews and approves the responses to a set of questions prior to it going to the Attachment C committee. So there's actually two levels of committees. The consumer-directed committee consists of program staff, both on the caregiver program side and on our home care program side, our ISEP program. We have legal staff that are assigned to this Attachment C committee or consumer-directed committee. And then we also have our local program operations division is who oversees every area agency on aging's total service plan. So they're also involved because they're the direct liaison with working with the local office for aging and providing technical assistance. So it's a small group, but enough of us to have like very different views. Who am I missing? And fiscal, and we have a fiscal representative. So it's a cross-divisional team that, takes a look at their responses and works with them if we feel that there needs to, be some additional information provided. So we can go to the next slide, Jill. And I know that this is really small print and probably very hard to see on the slides, but we did want to just kind of share with you the type of questions that we ask. When we decided to expand our model and allow for vouchers and, out-of-home respite options, we had to collect a lot more information from them. And we also had to ask them, did you previously have a model that we had approved and you're just looking to expand it now? Or is this a brand new model? So we can share this in a Word doc if it is to make it easier to read for you. But essentially, it's 10 questions, and we're asking, why they're planning to implement. We always feel like it's important to have this opportunity because I can tell you when our home care program asks a very similar question within their set of questions, we get a lot of responses that they're offering this because of the workforce shortage. And we feel it's important for them to understand that that should not be the only time that they are making a self-directed model available. you know, whether it's a caregiver directed or, you know, it's a consumer directed, that this, no matter if there's sufficient workforce or not, you know, it's their right to be able to choose whether they want to self-direct. So this question and them answering this question provides us that opportunity to have some dialogue with them. If we see a response that says, you know, due to the shortage of home care workers, that's why they're implementing it. Well, we can go back and then we can kind of share, you know, our thinking about it to help them think about it differently. And then we ask them to describe the model. I will tell you that in previous versions, before we finalized this, we had it as like a check mark box, you know, with the various models that they could offer. And we decided to actually make it open-ended. I wanted to hear from them. I wanted narrative. I wanted to, you know, understand exactly what they were envisioning instead of it just being a box that they check. Then we get into asking them to talk about, you know, the structure, like the administrative functions, you know, who's going to manage these functions? Are they going to be processing these in-house? Are they going to contract with someone? You know, we needed a good, clear understanding of the roles and responsibilities of each party. We want to make sure they understand the roles and responsibilities of each party. And I can tell you we had only one submission so far since we issued the program standards, and we were able to really go back and point to the sections within the program standards that they should be you know, referencing to make sure that they fully understand each of the roles and responsibilities, and that the caregiver is the employer in these models. And so the list goes on. I think you get the gist of, you know, essentially what we're trying to get at with asking these questions. It's just a really clear understanding of what they're trying to set up before they implement, so that we can help them do any course correction that might be needed so that the implementation is smooth and they have an effective program. But we will share this document so it's easier to read in a Word format. So we can go to the next slide. So when we were putting the program standards together, it was quite an interesting process, because as we were wanting to include and communicate certain pieces of information about caregiver directed, it wasn't necessarily fitting in standards that were policy and were a directive of what was required for the program. It was really more informational and meant to be, you know, resources and tools. So we, you know, we do have a way that we communicate tools and resources and any sort of technical assistance through a technical assistance memorandum. And so we kind of would put things aside as we would come across them through the whole development of the standards and say, you know, no, that doesn't really belong in the standards, but it's still really good, useful information that we want to make sure we get in their hands. So let's set it aside and we'll work on a technical assistance memorandum once the standards are finalized. And you know, we'll issue that so that they have all of those tools and resources in, you know, one document, one resource that they can reference in the future. And I imagine as new resources become available, this will be something we'll go back to on a regular basis, probably annually, to take a look at it and see, you know, are there new things that we could add to it and reissue it? You know, probably needs to be updated every year. And we did get, you know, pull a lot of the contents we included in this from ARCH and everything we've learned, you know, through participation in this learning collaborative and what is on ARCH's website. And we did also, we were so excited when, you know, Jill announced that they were working with Applied Self-Direction and was going to have an updated self-directed respite voucher guidebook made available. So we actually, I think if I remember correctly, that like caused us to extend our own internal deadline. Like nobody knew that we were trying to complete this TAM to send out to the network. I think we originally were targeting like October right after we were issuing the standards, but then we decided to hold off, and I don't think we got it issued until later in the new year. Yeah, it looks like in April of 23, because we wanted to make sure that we had everything that was in that updated voucher guidebook from March. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And I think I kind of covered this already because I jump ahead a lot. But essentially, I think I did. The purpose of the guidance was really just to be sure that they implement an effective program. So we can go to the next slide. So this just kind of covers the content. So we had it structured in a way that we provided an overview of respite. We wanted to make sure that the readiness and the capacity was there for the AAA. So we, wanted to kind of provide them a way to like self-assess, right? And see, okay, like, do I have all the pieces I need in place before I go and launch this? We wanted to share information about various program structures, get more in depth on roles and responsibilities, ideas around marketing and outreach, factors that could influence participation, eligibility and prioritization, respite providers. We talked about the training because New York, thankfully, the coalition participated in the pilot project with the respite provider training. So that was like perfect timing, especially with all of this work that was happening. So we had somewhere that we could point our network to for respite providers to take that training. What they needed to be mindful of regarding quality and risk management, and then options for forms. I mean, they were all samples. There wasn't anything that was required. It was really just, meant to give them these tools so that they could launch quickly and easily. So next slide. We had connected with Jill at Arch to very early in the stage in the fact that we were developing a readiness assessment tool. At the time, we had an intern working with us, an MSW intern, and we had another project. It was actually, it was through our elder abuse program that I had been part of. And I remember we were feeling like we needed to provide a tool like this, a readiness tool for that project, for the network that was going to be applying for those funds. And so the idea sparked in me of saying, like, I could see a readiness tool being beneficial here as well, so that, our AAAs could self-assess and be like, what am I missing? What do I have to give more thought to that maybe I'm not thinking about that would be important to before we move forward with implementation. So when I shared that with Jill, Jill thought it was a great idea, and then they worked with Applied Self-Direction, and I would say I can go beyond just I would say our whole team, Abbey, Amber, we were thrilled when, Jill shared the news that Applied Self-Direction was going to work on this tool because it saved us the effort. And we figured since it was something that was customizable and, some of the questions could be removed or you could add additional questions, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. And we felt that it was, fitting to just use that tool as part of our TAM. So we did include that in the TAM that we issued to our network back in April. Okay, so next slide. So you can see that what we've covered has been over the course of multiple years, but I'll bring us to May of 2023. I should back it up for a minute because we don't have a slide on this, but I want to kind of share what triggered us to make the decision about doing these regional trainings. A lot of the program standards we felt were, it wasn't any new information as far as requirements go. It was all built on the Older Americans Act. The National Family Caregiver Support Program has been around since 2001. So we were kind of in awe when we did a presentation on the standards. And I know that today's presentation is not about our program standards, but I just want to share that we were excited to engage our network on the opportunity to give us feedback. So we actually did a webinar and walked them through the draft standards to allow them an opportunity to give us feedback before we finalized them. I always feel like working in partnership allows for buy-in, and you get commitment when they feel like they're part of the process. And I feel like that too with working with our coalition. So I'm just sharing that because since I've been in this position, and it's about 5.5 years now, it just seems to work well. But the one thing that came out of that was the amount of questions and concerns through the feedback that we got. It was evident that we had AAAs that were at all different starting points. And we did not realize, right, that we would be having that problem because there wasn't a lot of new policy within the standards. It was very minimal when it came to what the state was requiring. So that triggered us to do 5 regional trainings for the network. And we, were in person and we did them hybrid. We were in person and virtual, and we went around the state the whole month of May. And we made the decision to include a caregiver-directed respite segment because, as we mentioned earlier, this is an optional component. So we, again, felt like, we're the state office staff that, often are telling our network what they have to do and how they have to do it. And, I tend to think that we've built really good trust and rapport with them. But at the end of the day, sometimes I think that they take information better from either peers or subject matter experts. So Abbey and I talked about, what do we think about partnering with Applied Self-Direction, since they really do have an expertise in this area, and, include them in our agenda. And so that's exactly what happened. And they developed training, and I think that they had an hour. I think they presented for about 45 minutes. And then they opened it up for Q&A for about 15 minutes. But we wanted our network to understand the benefits and why they should consider offering such a model, because truly I feel like caregivers, want that control and choice, and often offering it will make the difference in them accepting the respite care in some cases. So we feel like it went over well. Again, it was just this past May. You can go to the next slide, Jill. The topics that were covered within the Applied Self-Direction training, they went through what is self-direction. They provided an overview of caregiver-directed respite services. They talked about the evolution and the development of self-direction. So they just wanted to make sure people understood that history and how far we've come. They talked about who's who with the caregiver-directed respite, the nuts and bolts, and then they got into some more depth on the quality management and fraud reduction, because we did share with them that we felt like that was a big piece, a big reason, a big factor of why many, chose not to offer caregiver-directed. So we are not truly effective with our program standards until October 1st. So, we're waiting to get those responses to those questions and those requests for attachment C to make a change in their program model. And we're hoping that we'll see a flood of them over the next 6 months to a year. But if we go to the next slide, we're pleased to share that, a lot of this work and what we were doing and why we felt it was important to, engage the coalition and work collaboratively on this is because, we wanted there to be this option for AAAs to potentially work with our coalition to administer the vouchers. They've had, a year and a half of experience now in administering vouchers, and we're building a system that could be sustained by not only our network, but other networks, within the state to see our coalition as a resource and being able to do this function for them. So we've had 3 AAAs that have expressed interest in working with the coalition, and they've actually talked with Doris on, you know, what that would look like. And now I think if Jill is so kind, we did ask her if she could help us with polling all of you that do have a voucher program. If you're charging a particular admin cost, you know, this is where we're trying to get a feel for what would be appropriate for the work the coalition would be doing on behalf of our network in processing those vouchers. So hopefully, Jill
can you all see the, can you all see the poll? Oh yes, people are voting. That's great.
And I'm going to try to rejoin Jill while you're doing that, because I got onto my other computer. I'm a nervous wreck. I think my laptop just died. I'm gonna have to bring it to the office. Oh,
You
boy.
did it seamlessly, Deana. There's no problem on our.
Well, it's hard when you can't see anybody and you just have the phone, but thank goodness I did connect by phone. I thought that was a good plan.
We'll give it another few seconds. Only about a third of people have voted. I should have had an option here. We don't have a voucher program, but I'm hoping that most of you on the call are running or affiliated with some type of voucher program and can respond to this question. About half of you had responded. We'll give it another 20 seconds. Okay, I think everyone's done voting. We'll end the poll, share the results. Can everyone see the results?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. Jennifer, do you want to just go over the results with everyone? Can you see them?
Sure, yeah. So according to your answers, so we had 10 people respond, and it looks like half of programs that responded don't charge an administrative fee. 3 responded that they charge between 1% and 10%. 1 is charges between 11 and 20%, and then another 1 program charges between 21 and 30%. So it's, you know, I think it's definitely a wide range, and just from my experience in Tennessee, it's something that, you know, that you definitely need to think through, and it also depends on how much people are willing to pay. So it's a conversation with funders and who you're administrating the voucher program for, to actually come up with a good cost. So those are the results.
It would make for a very interesting discussion question to probe into this a little bit more.
Yes.
Meeting is being recorded. Oh goodness. So hopefully I'm back in, Jill, hopefully.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, perfect. Okay. And I think that was pretty much the end of our presentation. I appreciate you guys taking the time to do the poll. That's helpful for us. I think it'll be helpful for Doris too, and just like thinking through as she's working with our AAAs on what she would like to do, and thinking about, you know, long-term sustainability. I'm connecting back to the Zoom. I don't know what we're at with time. Oh, and Doris is on. Hi, Doris.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you both, Abbey and Deana, for that great presentation. This is wonderful. So let's open it up to see if there's any questions from anybody for Abbey and Deana about their presentation, about what they've done. I noticed one question early on in the chat. Someone asked, how are you able to conduct the focus groups using internal staff? And that was something that a question that raised in my head, if you did use internal staff only to help facilitate the focus groups, or if you hired an outside facilitator.
We used
Abby,
a
you want to answer?
yeah, we used a caregiver coordinator from one of our AAAs. So it wasn't any of the staff at the state office, but the caregiver coordinator who works at one of the county offices for aging was the facilitator.
Great, thank you. What other questions do people have? Let's see, Nicholas, I see your raised hand. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I apologize in advance. I'm kind of working from home. I have a bit of a cold, so I apologize for my raspy voice. And again, I have a question, but I'm trying to untangle because your presentation, talked about the 3E side of things, but also the lifespan respite grant side as well. That correct?
Yep.
Okay, so my question is, I noticed the grant for the kinship caregivers. It seemed that there wasn't a disability or medical condition requirement for the people they're caring for. But is there an age requirement for the kinship caregiver themselves, like the 3E funding?
Not under the lifespan respite funding.
Okay, so
We did.
For example, like
we did that intentionally.
Okay, well, the reason I ask, so a 40-year-old aunt who's raising her nephews could apply for this kinship grant and receive reimbursement for care.
Yes.
Okay, because I'm just comparing it to, I'm from the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we have the Lifespan Respite program as well, but we serve kinship caregivers, but they have to be caring for a grandchild or relative that does have some sort of diagnosis. So I just found it was very interesting that you intentionally left that out.
Yeah, under the lifespan respite grant, we don't have any age requirement or just any caregiver. It doesn't have to be any type of disability or anything. Any caregiver across the lifespan can access the funding.
Oh, well, cool. Thank you so
And
much.
I think to that point, if I could just add to, I think the reason too is because those are the caregivers that would slip through the cracks that didn't have another program, because of that eligibility. So we were intentional in wanting to make sure that we were able to support caregivers who didn't have another program that they could access.
Thank you so much. I think that's excellent, and that gives me thought for future changes to our own program. So I appreciate that.
It would be very helpful if you're not addressing the group that you mute yourselves.
It's probably me.
Thank you.
Great. How about any other questions that came up? Personally, I would like to talk a little bit more and dig into the admin question that was asked. I know when I was with the Tennessee Respite Coalition, this was something that we had talked about. And I remember going through, our looking at our costs and really drilling down to what does it cost to provide a voucher or an hour of respite, and looking at some metrics to really understand all the administration, the staff time, and everything that went into it. So for those of you that answered that you do charge a percentage of admin, how did you figure out? I'm just curious, how did you figure out what percentage that you would charge?
Jennifer, this is Aita in Oklahoma.
Yes.
I apologize that I've been on, but I'm just now actually joining at my desk. So here in Oklahoma, we do work with a fiscal partner. They are formerly Easter Seals. They're now called Woven Life. They're our fiscal agent, and they have given us a reduced rate, and we pay them a 15% admin cost for the amount of respite vouchers. If we were to calculate the actual cost, I am sure it would be higher. But because they also serve family caregivers, I believe they allowed us a discounted rate because of our like interest in serving families. So I don't know if that helps. And of course, here at the University of Oklahoma, we have indirect costs that we also pay. It's 26%, which is quite high, in my opinion, because of course I want more funds to go to direct service. But I understand that those costs pay for a lot that it takes to run a program. But in terms of respite vouchers specifically, it is 15%. But that, in my opinion, I believe is under, that's a great rate.
Yes.
So Aida, this is Doris from New York. I'm just curious. So you're still paying the 26% indirect cost rate on top of the 15% that you're charging? Okay.
So, well, we pay just for respite vouchers, it's the 15% to Woven Life. Yes. And then we do have a threshold, thankfully, that I believe it's 25,000. And then after the 25, we don't have to pay the 26%. So that's getting a little bit more detailed, but just to keep it simple for everyone, 15% on the respite vouchers is our admin cost.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up though, because the indirect rate is the problem that I'm facing. So
I
thanks.
share that and would love to talk to you. We used to have a set rate with our state agencies. As a university, we're considered a state agency. And I would love to, have a one-on-one conversation about that. I share maybe even some frustration when it comes to that, but we have just done our best to advocate for direct services that support respite vouchers. And of course, with the help of our partner, and Talena's on here, our state partner, we're going to continue to do that. But yes, it's just additional costs that maybe some that are affiliated with the university that have to take that into consideration. I would love to see the Fed set the rate. If that is maybe just something to put on our wish list, because when the Fed set the rate, that's what has to be applied. And so maybe that's just another angle, and this group would be interested. And of course, Jill maybe even has some experience with that. But if we could get the feds to set a rate, we could definitely really help and benefit with that.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Let's see, Geraldine, I see you had your hand raised.
Yes, hi, Geraldine of Delaware. We are a single unit of aging in Delaware. We do not have AAAs. So we do contract with providers for our Lifespan Respite Voucher program. Easter Seals is the provider of that. I know Nancy is invited to this meeting, but I don't see her on this meeting. So we do not control the administrative cost, but if my memory serves me correctly, in our contract with Easter Seals, the cost is 20% is what they charge us for it.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and it's interesting, kind of as we're talking, of course, there's some people who are on this that would be the payer of the administration fee, and some people on this call that would be the recipient of the administration fee. So you've got two different groups coming together to talk about it, which is a really interesting conversation. Anybody want to chime in on the administration cost of vouchers?
For those of you who don't charge an administrative fee, how do you cover the costs of running the program? I know Nick Slentz responded, well, we don't charge an administrative fee because we're the state agency and we administer the program ourselves. I understand that, but if you're an outside agency that's not charging administrative fee, can you elaborate on that a little bit? Feel free to, even if you're not comfortable coming off mute, we'll accept your responses in the chat as well.
Lisa Schneider said, in the chat, we use other funding to offset admin, i.e. state funds, grants, etc. And I can speak to, again, in Tennessee, some of our funders were private foundations. So we would build in the staff time and salary and supplies and everything into a grant budget, which included the line item of the money that actually went to vouchers. So, so depending on how you're doing it, those we didn't necessarily have a set administrative fee. It was, again, built into the grant to cover the line items in our budget, really. Okay, and Corey, I see you raised your hand.
Well, hi. For our grant, it's we get our funds from the state for Helping Hands of Vegas Valley for our voucher program, and we have to match 15%. But the match can be in kind or cash, and it's 15% of the entire amount, not just the admin fees. It includes the grant fee, even though our grants are more like a pass-through because they give us some money, but we pay the vendor directly. So we have, X amount that's just vouchers. So it's sort of a pass-through, and we still have to match that. So if we get a $600,000 grant, we have to match 15% of that, which, being a nonprofit can be a little bit on the hairy side. But we do match with in kind, and they allow that. So what happens with that is we ask the vendors to take a contracted rate, whether it's their normal rate or not, and then the difference is donated back to us, and so that helps with the match. That offset the match last year by 40,000, the year before probably by 50, and so that does help.
Great.
And then volunteer hours and things like that. Those are the other ways we match it. Very rarely do we have to come up with that in cash itself. We can usually do it in kind.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that answered how you were looking at it. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And I think, I think each state agency and coalition definitely has their own way of doing things. If it's different if you're an independent nonprofit and trying to do things one way, but if you're
exactly
a state agency,
we are an independent nonprofit. It's sort of funny because we're also the fiscal agent for the state, one of the fiscal agents for the state. So we charge an admin fee to them. So.
Oh, the lines that get crisscrossed. That's always fun. I just want to chime in. Oh, and Lisa also said in the chat, some fees over and above cost and match requirement may constitute program income, correct? That's a really good question. I'm not sure how to answer that one. Jill, do you have an answer for that question? If it would constitute program income?
I have no idea either.
Okay.
I think it's a good question to ask. I would like to know, yeah.
It is a great question.
Who would be making the consideration about program income? Who are you referring to? Are we worried about somebody?
I could see that though being a benefit for our network. because the AAAs like have to, they have to show program income for the National Family Caregiver Support Program. So if they were contracting with the coalition to administer vouchers for caregivers under, the National Family Caregiver Support Program, I think the fee they're paying the coalition is, if I'm interpreting the question correctly, they could count as program income. I don't know. That's interesting. I'm curious. I'd like to know the answer to that too. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Except that, Deana, for us, the challenge is that the coalition is embedded within a nonprofit that takes the admin fee.
Exactly. Yeah. You're growing so big, Doris, you might have to go out on your own.
No.
Oh goodness, that's an interesting one. So Lisa, if you're still on, and want to clarify that, let us know, because I know if you're, for nonprofits with the 990, you're allowed to report program income on your 990. So I know that wouldn't be a big effect on if it was a nonprofit accepting those fees. But for a state agency, that's another question. So anybody else have any, administration fee? This has been a really good discussion, and I think it's one that hasn't happened in a while, I don't think, Jill, right?
We haven't focused on administrative costs in a while. I am curious to know if anyone has any questions for Deana and Abbey regarding the process that they underwent to build on what they learned from their Lifespan Respite Care Grant Voucher Program to applying it to the National Family Caregiver Support Program Voucher Program. That's a very interesting expansion of the lifespan, and again builds on our original intent for the Lifespan Respite Program, that it would be the coordinator and the stimulus for growing respite across multiple state agencies. And if it works out well with the coalition being the central point of administering the vouchers, further consolidates and de-silos multiple funding streams. So it's a model that I find particularly interesting and really excited to see it moving forward in such a big state as New York. Is anybody else considering, especially those of you who have been running Lifespan Respite programs for a while? And I know some of you are already drawing down other state funds from other agencies and perhaps running it through your Lifespan Administrative Voucher Program. But is anybody else considering that, or may consider it now?
I'm happy to just share that it has worked very well in Oklahoma. Because of our work under Lifespan, we have been able to partner with some supplemental funding with Maternal and Child Health Bureau, Title V, specifically for children with special needs. If there are other programs that partner with Maternal and Child Health Bureau, Title V, or find out who that is, because it's been great. Now, again, it was supplemental funds, and these were respite vouchers that could be used specifically for children. We have also been able to partner with Developmental Disabilities Council here in Oklahoma. And again, you all may have that partner. And we've been able to leverage some funds for respite vouchers for a caregiver retreat. We received a grant to offer these retreats and then issued respite vouchers so those caregivers could have a weekend away. And again, that's the Developmental Disabilities Council. And then, of course, we have been partnering ongoing with our Oklahoma State Department of Mental Health Substance Abuse Services under their systems of care. And we issue respite vouchers, but those caregivers are participating in a specific mental health systems of care program. But again, they can access respite vouchers that is paid for by the State Department of Mental Health Substance Abuse Services. So those are just some examples. Again, because of our success under Lifespan, those state agencies have reached out and have taken notice. And I'm confident in the event they have funds, we may have other opportunities. I would love to see it be more consistent, but right now it's been to provide supplemental funding. Other than the example I gave with State Department of Mental Health, that has been an ongoing renewed contract, respite vouchers for those caregivers. So, and Jill, I know you're well aware of that because of our success under Lifespan, building capacity here in Oklahoma. Other state agencies, thankfully, we coordinate on a regular basis so that we can match them with the appropriate respite program.
Before Jennifer closes up this meeting, I really want to thank Deana and Abbey for doing something that we don't do often enough. And that is, in addition to highlighting our successes, to go back and have someone explain to us step by step by step, how did we become successful? What were the actions that we had to take? What were the processes that we went through to develop this successful program? And that's what I found really particularly valuable about what you presented today, Deana and Abbey. So thank you so much for sharing that level of detail, so that if somebody really wanted to follow in your footsteps and expand their Lifespan Respite approach to their start with your AAAs, with your family caregiver support program, especially if it's within the agency that already administers Lifespan. That seems like a logical place to begin. And here is the manual that they've given us to be able to do that. So I just wanted to personally thank you for doing that and sharing that with us. Very valuable.
Our pleasure. We always thank you for the opportunity to share.
Yes, and I'll second Jill's thanks for being willing to present today. And Deana, I know you added to the chat that just to make sure everybody saw that that New York does have recordings of the work group meetings that they conducted. And she's going to be working with Jill to be able to get those out to anybody that is interested in seeing those recordings. So it's wonderful that you have all that great documentation of the actual process of how you got to where you are. So thank you so much. And I'm so happy everybody could attend today and hear the great presentation. Just a reminder, the next Respite Voucher Learning Collaborative is on the calendar for December 14th. So I know Jill will be sending out reminder emails and calendar invites, but if you have a chance today, just look at December 14th and make sure that it's on there. So anything else before we leave?
Hold on to those discussion guides, because we will be visiting those questions in smaller groups. Give you a chance to do that.
Definitely. So, okay. Well, thank you all for being here. Thanks again to Abbey and Deana from New York with the presentation, and look forward to talking to everybody in December.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.